You wake up in the morning, grab your coffee, open social media, and see everyone celebrating buying their own home as if it were the ultimate financial achievement. You know what I see when I look at this after 50 years of watching how people build and destroy fortunes? I see the greatest silent theft of wealth in modern history. I see people locking up 80% of their wealth in a single illiquid asset that doesn't produce cash flow, that charges you every month, that depreciates over time despite what they say, and that will suck up every penny of growth potential you could have. And I'm not talking about theory. I managed $160 billion through 4 major crises. I've seen fortunes worth $300 million turn to dust because people made exactly the same 4 mistakes that I'm going to show you now. I've seen brilliant executives, doctors, lawyers, people who make $500,000 a year reach their 60s completely broke because they bought these 4 wealth destroyers that everyone thinks are smart investments. The first thing I need you to understand is that the definition of wealth they sold you is fundamentally wrong. Wealth is not the size of your house. It is not the model of your car. It is not how many things you own. Wealth is how long you can maintain your standard of living without working. It is the amount of assets that generate cash flow working for you while you sleep. And these 4 destroyers that I'm going to reveal do exactly the opposite. They drain your cash, tie up your capital, and turn you into a financial slave disguised as a successful person. And before you think I'm exaggerating, let me tell you what happened to a guy named Richard in 2006. Richard earned $450,000 a year as vice president of a technology company in Silicon Valley. He bought a $2,400,000 house because all his peers were buying bigger houses, and he didn't want to be left behind. It financed $1,800,000. You bought a $95,000 BMW X7 because a VP can't drive a regular car, right? He paid $3,200 a month in private school tuition for his 2 children because the public school wasn't good enough. He had a $230,000 boat docked in Sausalito that he used 3 times a year. When the crisis of 2008 arrived, Richard had $740,000 worth of company stock, which plummeted to $120,000. I only had $46,000 in cash. The company laid off, and he lost his job. Result? He lost his house to foreclosure, sold his boat for $110,000, had to take his kids out of private school, and at 48 was basically starting from scratch financially. And you know what's worse? Richard wasn't stupid. He had an MBA from Stanford. He simply did what everyone does. He bought the 4 wealth destroyers that society programs you to think are signs of success. And if you're not already subscribed to this channel, subscribe now, because what I'm going to show you in the next 20 minutes could literally save you from wasting decades of hard work on assets that look like investments, but are actually financial black holes. So let's go to the first destroyer. And this is the most sacred, the most protected, the one that no one dares to question. Own house. Everyone tells you that renting is throwing money away, that owning your home is the best investment you can make, that you need to climb the real estate ladder. Here's the brutal mathematical truth that no one tells you. When you buy a $500,000 house with 20% down, you're not making a $500,000 investment. You're making a $100,000 investment with $400,000 in debt. For the first 10 years, 82% of your monthly payment goes toward interest, not toward building equity. If your mortgage is $2,500 a month, only $450 is actually putting down the principal in the first few years. The other $2,050 is pure interest that you will never see back. Plus, you have property tax, insurance, maintenance, repairs. A conservative rule of thumb is that you spend 1% of the home's value per year on maintenance. For a $500,000 house, that's $5,000 a year. Property tax varies, but let's use 1.2% plus $6,000 per year. Sure, another $1,500. So you're paying $30,000 a year on your mortgage, plus $12,500 in fixed costs. $42,500 a year to live in a $500,000 house. Now, let's do the real math that home sellers never do. See, instead of putting $100,000 down and paying $42,500 a year, you rent an equivalent place for $2,000 a month, $24,000 a year, and invest the difference in down payment plus the monthly difference. You would invest the initial $100,000 plus $18,500 per year. In 30 years, assuming a conservative return of 8% per year, which is the historical average for the S&P 500, you would have $2,341,000. And do you know how much equity you would have in the region of $500,000 after 30 years of paying the mortgage? The house may have appreciated in value to $800,000, assuming 2% annual appreciation. You paid $1,275,000 in total payments over 30 years. Your net return? $300,000 appreciation minus all transaction costs, renovations, vacant periods. You have maybe $300,000 to $400,000 real winnings. Against $2,341,000 if I had invested. You literally left $1,900,000 on the table because you believed in the myth of homeownership, and I know exactly what you're thinking right now. You're thinking, but Ray, I need to live somewhere anyway, so rent is also sunk cost. Here is where most fail to understand the difference between housing cost and capital investment. We all have housing costs. This is inevitable. The question is, do you want to tie up the majority of your equity in an illiquid asset that does not generate cash flow, or do you want to maintain capital flexibility and liquidity to invest in assets that really grow? At Bridgewater, when we look at long-term wealth creation, one of the most important metrics is capital velocity. Capital at a standstill is capital dying. Owning your own home is literally the definition of idle capital. You can't sell a room when you need money. You can't liquidate 10% of the kitchen to take advantage of an investment opportunity. The capital remains locked up, dead, waiting for you to sell the entire house decades later. And I haven't even started talking about the opportunity cost of crises. In 2008, when the market fell 56%, those with liquid capital were able to buy shares at fire sale prices. Microsoft at $20, Apple at $12, Amazon at $51. If you had invested $50,000 in these three in equal shares in March of 2009, today you would have approximately $1,800,000. But if you were a homeowner, you were probably worried about losing your home to foreclosure, with no capital available to take advantage of the biggest buying opportunity in a generation. And I want to know from you, where are you watching this video from? Leave a comment telling me your city and country, because I want to understand how many people in different global real estate markets are being sold this same lie that owning a home is always the best investment. Now for the second wealth destroyer that is even more insidious because it is small enough for you to rationalize. New car, especially expensive new car. Here is the killer math that destroys the possibility of wealth for millions. A $60,000 car depreciates approximately 20% in the first year. $12,000 evaporated just by you driving out of the dealership. In the first 5 years, the car will lose 55 to 60% of its value. Your $60,000 car will be worth $24,000 to $27,000 after 5 years. You lost $33,000 to $36,000. But wait, there's more. You probably financed with a rate of 5 to 7%. In 5 years, you paid another $8,000 to $10,000 in interest alone. Expensive new car insurance is another $2,000 a year, 10 grand in 5 years. Maintenance, gasoline, another 15,000 in 5 years. Total costs over 5 years for a 60,000 car? Approximately $68,000 in disbursements plus $33,000 in depreciation. You spent $101,000 to have an asset worth $24,000. Net loss of $77,000 in 5 years. Now for alternative mathematics that changes lives. Buy a reliable used car for $15,000 in cash. Honda Accord, Toyota Camry, 3 to 4 years old. Heavy depreciation has already happened. This car will serve you for the next 8 to 10 years with basic maintenance. Total costs over 5 years? $15,000 initial, plus $3,000 for extra maintenance due to being used, plus cheaper insurance because you don't need full coverage. $1,200 per year, $6,000 total. Same gasoline, $15,000. Total? $39,000 versus $101,000 for the new car. Difference of $62,000 in just 5 years. Invest that $62,000 at 8 points are cent a year for 25 years? $423,000? You choose new car for 5 years or nearly 500,000 decades later? But I know what some are thinking. Ray, I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer, I'm an executive, I need to convey an image. Here's the truth no one wants to hear. The people you are trying to impress with your new car don't care about you. They're too busy worrying about what you think of them. And the people who really matter, who have real wealth, are secretly judging you for wasting money on a depreciable asset. Warren Buffett drives a Cadillac that costs less than most SUVs that people with a tenth of his wealth buy. Mark Zuckerberg drove an Acura TSX for years. These guys understand that every dollar in car is a dollar that is not compounding in the market. I've seen this happen thousands of times in my career. Young professional begins to earn well, buys an $80,000 German car, thinks he is celebrating success. 5 years later, he is exchanging it for another one worth $90,000 because the status needs to increase. 5 more years. $110,000. At 45 years old, this person has spent $350,000 on cars over 20 years. If you had invested that difference in index funds, you would have $1,200,000. But you have $300,000 in your retirement account and you think you're late. It's not late, it's broken by choice. Third destroyer, and this one is controversial because it involves your children. Excessively expensive private education. I'm not saying education doesn't matter. I'm saying that paying $50,000 a year for high school tuition when there is a decent public option is financial destruction cloaked in parental love. Here's the math. Private high school, 4 years at $50,000 a year, $200,000. Top-tier private college, 4 years at $80,000 per year, $320,000. Total? $520,000 per child. If you have 2 children, $1,040,000. Now let's compare. Public high school, basically free. State public college with some financial aid, $20,000 a year, $80,000 total. Difference per child? $440,000. Times 2 children, $880,000. Invested at 8% of the child's 0 years until he turns 40? $21,423,000. You read that right. The difference between an expensive private school and a decent public school invested for 40 years is $21 million for 2 children. And here's what studies consistently show. Controlling for IQ and family background, there is no significant difference in long-term income between graduates of decent public versus elite private colleges. A study by Stacey Dale and Alan Kruger analyzed data from tens of thousands of students. Conclusion? Students who were accepted into top colleges but chose public universities earned practically the same as those who went to the top ones. What matters is the student's talent and drive, not the name on the wall. Of course, Harvard opens doors. But do you know what opens more doors? Having $2 million in investments by the age of 40 because your parents were financially smart. You can buy all the doors Harvard opens and still have leftovers. And I'm not even talking about extreme cases. I know a guy who sent his daughter to Duke, $82,000 a year. She graduated in liberal arts, works at a nonprofit earning $48,000 a year, happy with her choice. But there are $180,000 in student loans that parents are helping to pay. Total invested in her education? $350,000. She could have gone to the University of North Carolina, an excellent public school, for a fifth of the cost, had the same career, and the family would have had $280,000 more working in the market. In 30 years, $2,800,000 lost because they needed Duke's prestige. The fourth destroyer is the most subtle and perhaps the most dangerous precisely because it appears harmless. Lifestyle creep through small subscriptions and recurring services that individually cost little but collectively strangle your ability to build wealth. Here's how it works. You start earning more, then add Netflix, $15. Then Spotify Premium, $11. So Disney Plus, $14. HBO Max, $16. Amazon Prime, $15. Apple iCloud Storage, $3. Dropbox, $12. Adobe Creative Suite, $55. Gym membership fancy, $120. Peloton subscription, $44. Meal kit delivery 3 times a week, $240. Premium car wash subscription, $35. Cloud gaming, $18. Meditation app, $15. 2 or 3 streaming music or podcasts, plus $20. Coffee subscription for special beans, $30. Wine club, $80. That's the average standard I see for urban professionals earning $150,000 to $300,000 a year. Add all of this and about 10 smaller services that I didn't even list. You can easily reach $800 to $1,000 per month in recurring subscriptions, $12,000 a year on little conveniences that you barely realize you're paying for because it's self-debited. Over 20 years, $240,000 in subscriptions. Invested at 8%? $1,146,000. You traded $1 million for the convenience of 15 streaming services and meal kits. And here's what's even more insidious about this destroyer. It grows silently. You add one here, another there. Never cancel anything because it's only $20. But 20 plus, 20 plus, 30 plus 45 becomes 200. And 200 per month becomes 400. I know couples making $400,000 combined who pay $1,500 a month in subscriptions and services, and when I make them sit down and list it, they are in shock. Gym you haven't used in 8 months? Still paying. Streaming service that signed up for a series and never canceled? Paying for 3 years? Software that purchased license but forgot to cancel auto-renewal? Paying. Cloud storage of photos you never look at? Paying. The psychological trap is that each one seems too small to worry about. $30 a month. Who cares? But $30 a month for 40 years at 8% return? $104,000. Every $30 subscription you maintain for 40 years costs $100,000 in wealth building. Each one. Now, let's connect the 4 destroyers and see the total cost of the illusion of success. Professional earning $200,000 a year. Buy a house worth $700,000 instead of renting, a new car worth $70,000 every 5 years, put 2 children in private school from kindergarten to college, keep $1,000 a month in lifestyle subscriptions. At 65, after 40 years of hard work, this person has $1,200,000 in retirement accounts, a paid-off house worth $1,300,000, and perhaps $200,000 in other savings. Total net worth? $2,700,000. Sounds good until you see the alternative. Same person, same income. Rent instead of buying, drive reliable used cars, use public schools, and invest heavily in state colleges. Cut unnecessary subscriptions. Invest all differences systematically in low-cost index funds. Result at 65? $14,800,000. You read that right. The difference between Path A and Path B for the same person with the same income is $12,100,000. $12 million evaporated in decisions that seemed like signs of success, but were actually financial anchors. And now comes the part that frustrates me the most in 5 decades of watching this happen again and again. The person on Path A with $2,700,000 will spend the last 20 years of his life stressed about money, worried about whether it will last, perhaps having to sell the house to pay for assisted living, leaving a modest inheritance for his children. The person on Path B with $14,800,000 can withdraw $400,000 a year indefinitely, travel the world, help children and grandchildren financially, donate millions to causes that matter, and still leave $8 to $10 million as an inheritance. Same earning capacity. Difference in consumption versus investment choices. And here's the hardest truth I'm going to give you. If you're in your 30s or 40s and you look at these numbers thinking it's too late, you're right if you don't change now. But it's also wrong because the mathematics of compounding is exponential. The last 15 years of accumulation produce more wealth than the first 25 years combined. Even if you wasted the last decade on these 4 destroyers, switching now could still result in a 3 to 4 million difference by retirement. But you have to stop today. Not next week when the bonus arrives. Not next year when you renegotiate salary. Today. Because every month that passes with a huge mortgage, new car depreciating, exorbitant tuition, and bleeding subscriptions is $10,000 to $15,000 of future equity that you will never recover. At Bridgewater, one of the principles we've tested in decades of capital management is pain plus reflection equals progress. The pain of seeing those numbers and recognizing that you're on Path A needs to turn into honest reflection about why you made those choices. Was it social pressure? Afraid of appearing unsuccessful? Need for external validation through symbols status? Lack of real financial education? And then this reflection needs to turn into progress, an immediate and radical change in behavior. Here is the protocol I recommend if you have identified with any of these destroyers. First, if you own a home and the home represents more than 30% of your total net worth, you are overexposed to a single illiquid asset. Seriously consider selling, especially if you are in an expensive market. Use equity to invest in a diversified portfolio and rent. I know it sounds radical. I know everyone will call you crazy. But the math doesn't lie. Second, if you have a financed car, or a car that is worth more than 15% of your annual income, sell it immediately. Buy reliable used for cash. Swallow your pride. A 5-year-old Honda Civic takes you to the same places as a new BMW, except one builds wealth and the other destroys it. Third, if your kids are in expensive private school and you're not a multimillionaire, have the difficult conversation. Transfer to a decent public school or good charter school. Use the money saved to open aggressively invested 529 plans. When they enter college, you will have hundreds of thousands available to pay for an excellent public school without debt. This is infinitely more valuable than private high school education. Fourth, sit down today and list every recurring subscription, membership, auto payment you have. Everything. So ruthlessly cancel anything you don't use weekly or that doesn't provide a clear return of value. Cut 80%. You don't need 15 streaming services. Share Netflix with family. Cancel Spotify and use the free version with ads. Cancel the expensive gym and do bodyweight exercises at home or run in the park. Every $100 a month that you cut and invest is $2,500 a year, which in 20 years turns into $100,000. Fifth, establish an absolute rule. Every salary increase, every bonus, every windfall, 50% goes straight to automatic investment before you see the money. Another 50% you can use to modestly improve quality of life. But never let lifestyle grow proportionally with income. This is the golden trap. Sixth, change your definition of wealth. Stop measuring success by house size or car model. Start measuring how many years of freedom you have purchased. If you have $500,000 invested and spend $50,000 a year, you have 10 years of freedom. If you have $2 million and spend $50,000, you have 40 years of freedom. This is real wealth. Freedom to choose work out of passion rather than necessity. Freedom to say no to an abusive client or toxic boss. Freedom to take 6 months off to care for sick father. Freedom to bet on a risky startup at 50 because you have a safety net. This freedom does not come from a big house or a German car. It comes from liquid assets, invested generating compound return. Seventh, and perhaps most importantly, understand that you are fighting against the entire consumer society that profits from you being broke. Banks want you to have a 30-year mortgage. Automakers want you to change your car every 3 years. Private schools want you to believe that they are essential to your children's future. Tech companies want you to subscribe to 10 services. Everyone profits from you choosing consumption over investment. You need to be radically countercultural. You need to be willing to be judged for driving an old car, living in a smaller house, sending your child to public school. Because 20 years from now, when you have $8 million in investments and they have $800,000 and they're stressed about money, you'll know you made the right choices. And I know that for some, this will seem too extreme. You'll think, Ray, I don't want to live poor just to die rich. Fair. But here's what you're not understanding. I am not suggesting that you live miserably. I'm suggesting you eliminate massive waste that doesn't bring real happiness. Happiness studies consistently show that after basic needs are met, more consumption does not bring more life satisfaction. A bigger house doesn't make you happier. Research shows that people in 200-square-foot homes are no happier than people in 100-foot homes. New car doesn't make you happier. The pleasure lasts 3 months and then returns to normal. Expensive private schools don't make children happier. It often creates extra pressure and anxiety. Multiple subscriptions don't make you happier. You watch 2 series and ignore 300 available. Do you know what really increases long-term happiness according to decades of research? Autonomy, ability to control your time, strong relationships, quality time with people you love, purpose, work or causes that give you meaning of, health, physical and mental capacity to enjoy life. And guess what? All 4 of these things are facilitated by having solid wealth building and destroyed by financial stress from excessive consumption. You have more autonomy with $2 million invested than with a house worth $1,300,000 that you cannot sell. You have better relationships when you're not stressed about bills and can take a real vacation, not financed with a credit card. You have more purpose when you can afford to do meaningful work, even if it pays less. You have better health when you don't have high cortisol 24/7, worrying about whether you'll be able to pay the bills. So, it's not about living poor. It's about living intentionally, spending heavily on what really brings value and ruthlessly cutting back on what doesn't. And speaking of cutting mercilessly, here's what I most see people rationalize when faced with this math. First rationalization, I work hard. I deserve these things. Of course, you deserve it. No one is saying they don't deserve it. The question is, would you rather deserve temporary symbol of success or permanent financial freedom? Because you can have one or the other in most cases, not both. Second rationalization, I only live once. I need to enjoy it now. True. But you'll probably live to be 80. Do you want to enjoy yourself from 30 to 45, and then live stressing about money from 45 to 80? Or do you want to live well but modestly from 30 to 45, and then live like a king from 45 to 80? The real YOLO is making sure all your years are good, not just the first 15. Third rationalization, my children deserve the best. Your children deserve financially stable parents